Bringing this back around to Foo Camp. I mean, I have invited people to Foo Camp because they're good. I've discovered them through comments on my blog, and they've said intelligent things. And I go, yeah, they've actually contributed to me. I'm going to invite them in. They're now, you know, I want to become closer with them. And there is that wonderful serendipity that you get out of these services. Right now, I'm working a lot on trying to put together a conference for sort of open government in DC. Because it struck me, oh my gosh. Actually, let me tell you this story. It's kind of funny. I don't want to mention names because they're. So you probably saw I was complaining on Twitter that Barack Obama stopped Twittering.
Yep. And
then I get a call from somebody who was at the last Foo Camp saying, actually an email saying, so I heard you were complaining about this. Do you want to talk about it? And I went, oh, so somebody I know already is involved in that whole process. So then I talked to this person who wanted to remain anonymous. You know, turns out is working with the transition team, and we start talking about other people in government who ought to be, you know, sort of on the radar of the transition team. And I realized, oh my gosh, you know, half of my peeps are already sort of in there, you know, one way or another. And then there's another half who, some of them, you know, this person's saying, oh yeah, I know that person. I hadn't thought about them. You know, in fact, I had them both at, we had an open government summit, and they were both, you know, some of these people were at together. But, you know, making those explicit connections. Yeah. And I thought, wow, you know, and so then I started calling some of the other people I knew who were working in the transition. And gradually it became clear to me that we have this mandate from, you know, Barack Obama that we want to have open, transparent government. And what's going to happen is there's going to be change makers who he puts into government, and they're going to have people who are resistant to them. They're going to have people who are wanting to do the right thing who don't know how. They're going to have, there's going to be all these other people who are buried in the organization somewhere who really know something, but they're 3 layers of the bureaucracy away from the person who would recognize their talent and say, wow, here's somebody who could really help teach our organization. I thought, wow, what could I contribute to the transition? I can create an event in DC that will, you know, bring all the bright people from outside who ought to be on the radar of the DC people, bring people out of the, you know, the lower echelons in DC, give them visibility, make them heroes, so that, you know, and get those people who are trying to make change, who give them a platform. And so that's what we're trying to put together, a series of events there. And I think that's.
Are you talking with Mika Sifri?
Oh yeah, sure,
Personal Democracy.
Yeah, definitely talk Andrew O'Shea and Mika. But that's really only one aspect. It was funny because when I talked with Mika and Andrew, they were, one of the things that they were saying was, oh, you know, but, you know, the only people who have money are all the government contractors, and, you know, so on and so forth, you know, and, you know, they were telling me why they thought it would be hard. And I said, but, you know, wait a minute, guys. If we could get those guys to spend, you know, who are going to probably win the bids for all this stuff because they know how to do all the ropes, if we could get them to hire as subcontractors, you know, people with clue, or, you know, otherwise, you know, find the people in those organizations that, you know, how much more powerful and important is that? Yeah. And that kind of brings up kind of yet another story. Just, you know, you see how all these things start to form into a plan. I gave a talk to a group. It's sort of a support group for CTOs and, you know, creativity people and in big organizations, and they have, part of the feature of the day is somebody brings in a case study, and this is a guy who was sort of the chief innovation officer at Lockheed, and his problem was that he really wanted to tackle the market for incompatible first responder systems for disasters. And he said, my problem in my organization is that Lockheed only responds to RFPs. And he was wanting to get support and advice from his peers. Now, I was a guest speaker, but I got to stay through the day, and I said, well, you know, I don't know anything about how to change Lockheed, but I'll tell you what I would do if I were in your shoes. I try to harness social media to create enough momentum around this idea that we need, you know, standards and compatibility for first responder systems that the government issues an RFP, you know. Yeah. You know, so again, I think, wow, there are people in these government contractors who are trying to do the right thing, who are trying to find the way forward. And again, how do we use the power of social media to support them and to give them the ability to advance this agenda?
When we went to DC, we met with congressmen who were using Quick and Twitter, and we're trying to start a new conversation and trying to apply change. And right now, it's just a handful. I can name 5 or 10, you know, 5 or 6 people who are doing that out of 635 people, right?
Right, but you know, the fact is, as soon as you know, one of those more junior Congress people becomes a celebrity through using the, you know, you'll get a lot more people on board. Yeah. And I think, you know, that's again, you know, part of the lesson here. Social media allows you to create new visibility for people. Yeah. And oh my gosh, look at our president. I mean, this guy is only in the Senate for 2 years, you know, but he figured out how to go direct. And he didn't have to work his way up the ladder. He was really adept at harnessing the new media to get his message across, to build a constituency. And I think that
he was adept at using the old media too.
Well, yeah, that's true too. I mean, he's a master of a lot of things. But I still think, you know, this idea that we could in fact help to enable, you know, the forces of change. You know, if you've got somebody in a senior position and they're not as adept, you know, there's some really interesting opportunities to actually give visibility to the voice of the fresh thinking.
Yeah, you just started a new conference on money.
Yeah.
And so you were trying to change politics on one side, the finance industry, or how people deal with money, or tell me a little bit about why you started that conference.
So Money Tech, I started last year actually. And the reason for, or actually no, I guess I launched it this year. It's coming up in February in New York, the second edition. That was really a result of a couple of conversations that were really thinking about the future of Web 2.0. Because I've been going out there and I've been saying, okay, Web 2.0 is really about networked information markets. Yeah. And one day, I slapped myself on the forehead and said, oh my gosh, you know, Wall Street financial markets are networked information markets. They're way bigger, they're worth way more, and they're way ahead of us in terms of scale, speed, everything else. They're innately social. You know, you look at the whole Soros theory of reflexivity. I mean, that's, you know, it's like if people think that this is just, you know, quantitative. You know, it's totally a social phenomenon. I said, well, I bet they can tell us a lot about the future. Yeah. And I also thought, hey, there's a lot of new techniques in the social and consumer web that also, you know, have bearing, you know, everything from people sort of looking at blogs and social media for input, you know, or something like Gerson Lehman that's sort of building expert networks or their next generation expert networks. So there's a lot of different ways that all this is coming together. But it was really, oh wait, we could get a view into our future. And of course, that future has turned out to be pretty dark. Yeah. You know, when you really think about it, there was this idea somehow that we could just have these computer algorithms that would get it all right. In fact, the computer algorithms really got it very badly wrong because we didn't take into account the human factor. You know, effectively, you can think in some ways the financial system was taken over by spammers. And if we'd had the right conversation, we would have recognized that they were spammers, you know, people who were, you know,
well, who's the
gaming the system.
Who's the guy who lost $50 billion?
Madoff.
Madoff, yeah. That's
He
a good
made off
example.
with
He made off, but he was very adept at using social structures to scam people.
Yeah.
And do you think we're seeing that in the blogs, or, you know,
we see all these things. I don't think that there's anything uniquely new media about any of this. I mean, you know, it's just human nature comes out. But what I do think is the speed and the scale matter. And you know, so if you think about, say, the fraud detection unit at eBay, or the you know, the whole sort of spam detection, you know, the amount of work that Google puts in, you know, and even with all that work, they're still kind of losing the battle. And then you think about, how does the SEC do enforcement?
Yeah.
You know, whoa, total disjoint. You know, these guys are both in these massively networked information markets. One of them really gets that there are bad actors and you need really strong policing. The other one says, no, no, we don't need regulation. You know, and we see, you know, there is the future if we don't actually have really active regulation. And I think it was interesting, this came up recently, there was a really dumb Register blog post about where they were kind of reading a whole lot into a comment that Marissa Mayer had made about that Google might take the sort of wiki search stuff that they were doing into account in search results. Yeah. And Andrew Orlovsky's making this big thing of, see, I told you Google's gaming the results. You know, there's human intervention. It should just be, you know, this is the beginning of the end. I'm going, you know, wait a minute. This is what makes Google good. They've actually done this from the very beginning. Yeah. You know, that they've figured out that there's a human element. You know, PageRank, recognizing that as opposed to just mechanical crawling. They're always testing their algorithms.
Well, and my famous quote was, bloggers put stuff into the system, put value in the system, and Google pays us back with power, right?
Absolutely. Well, I still, you know, probably the thing I quote from you most often is the story. I forget when it was that you said this to me, but, or no, you didn't say it to me. It was on one of your blog posts, which kind of goes again to how personal this is, because I remember it as if you said it to me, even though I just read it. You know, so the personal voice as opposed to the, you know, the old school published voice. You know, it was where it was when you went up to Washington to work for Microsoft, and you said, we all contribute to Google. You know, you know, I'll prove it to you. You know, I just discovered this great restaurant. They have a web page, but it's not in Google, but it will be tomorrow. Just watch, and you link to it. You know, and I've used that in just about every talk I've given about Web 2.0 since. You know, in reminding people that Google, you know, is a contributed database. You know, we all contribute every time we make a link, and
it's Victor's Coffee up in Redmond, and you can still pull it out of Google. In fact, I learned very early on, one of the reasons I kept blogging wasn't that I had an audience, right? I only had 18 people reading me, just like everybody else. But I learned I could write something about a restaurant, put it into Google, and then you know, 4 days later or 4 months later, I could pull it out of Google by searching on the name and searching on my name with it, right? So Victor's Coffee Scoble, and it would come right back out. That post I wrote would come right back out.
That's a really good point, that you actually, you know, you're creating an association between yourself and so it was a kind of bookmark.
And that's, I actually missed Delicious. With some of the things that I've missed over the last 8 years, one was Delicious. I never took to Delicious the way like Liz Lawley took to it, because I had a blog and I understood I could put bookmarks into Google.
I have to say, I used Twitter a lot, because I never really got into Delicious either. I mean, I loved it as an exemplar, and I talked about it a lot, but it never became part of my daily workflow. But Twitter, I'll often tweet something as a way of remembering it. These are my bookmarks, because I can search my tweet stream, you know? Yeah. And not only that, I'm explicitly sharing them.
Yeah. What was the best thing your company's done in the last 8 years, since the last downturn? What's the one thing you really, man, we nailed it? Is it Maker Faire? Is it?
Oh boy, it's tough to call. I mean, there's things that stand out for different reasons. Probably my best moment from the sort of the feeling of, oh man, did we nail this, was the launch of the Where 2.0 conference, because it was, I purely deduced the need for that. You know, I had this theory about Web 2.0 that it was this, okay, so it's about the internet as platform, it's about the shift to user-created data. It's also, you know, I'd say we're building an internet operating system in which the subsystems are going to be data subsystems. One of those subsystems is going to be location. Let's do a conference on that. And we launched the conference, and oh my God, you know, the whole Google mashup phenomenon arrived, you know, like just on cue. You know, we'd launched the conference, we announced it, oh my God, and Google announces their API, you know, at the event. It didn't even exist when we started planning the event. It was just like the perfect, you know, we could see the wave coming, and we put something right in the way, you know, our surfboard right in the way of it, and, you know, caught the wave perfectly. So that was uniquely satisfying that way. Maker, the Make magazine and Maker Faire, clearly on this really cutting edge of the future. Where it's this great exemplar of this idea that the future is often shaped by people who are having fun with technology. Not, it's not even, the commercial ecosystem is starting to arrive. But boy, what a phenomenon! We have 65,000 people, show up for this event, and it's
just one city. You have now three.
Yeah,
you're opening one in Europe, right?
Yeah, we are.
It's crazy.
So,
if we went back to when we were talking, 8 years ago, I would never have predicted that, right?
Yeah.
Because none of your books, that's the most surprising thing I think your company's done in the last 8 years, because it went in a different direction than your existing business. What do you think is going to be your next surprise?
That's a good question.
Of course, it won't be a surprise if you tell me. But
I don't think I'll know until it happens. I think we just, some idea comes up. It's often a serendipity. It's the serendipity of the people that we meet. Do
you think you'd do anything with cars, electric cars? Because that seems to be at the edges of food camp. There's always a cool car
I'm certainly
around.
interested in cars and energy, no question. I mean, there's a lot, and particularly, as I said, my son-in-law is deeply into the alternative energy world, and so I'm thinking a lot about that.
I love the robotics guys at Stanford who are building the robotics.
Yeah,
cars.
absolutely. And again, that was going back to books. That was another surprise book. That's really doing well. OpenCV, the Open Computer Vision package. It's an open source computer vision package, and it uses all the same algorithms as machine intelligence operations like Google. You look at programming collective intelligence in OpenCV, and you go, wait a minute, something interesting here. The same tools are used by biologists, by Web 2.0 people, and by robotics people. Does that tell you something about the shape of the future or what? But just in terms of the surprising parts, it's one of those things, something comes and you don't necessarily know what it is beforehand.
Do you think there's space for a real-time web conference?
Well, Arl Balkin's trying to do that a little bit.
Is?
Oh, you mean a real-time web?
Yeah.
You mean not virtual?
Because sort of Twitter, what changed from blogging to Twitter is now Twitter, I can have this real-time conversation with you.
I think that's, I'm not sure that I would see that as a conference subject. The thing that's really interesting, is an ideal conference helps to define a community. And now, in one sense, you could actually imagine a pretty interesting sort of Twitter con that would just be, oh my God, I want to meet all these people in the flesh. And that might be kind of cool, like a really big, low-cost thing. It's kind of like eBay Live, just like, here's everybody who's part of this community. That's kind of an interesting idea.
The problem is that community, since we've been going around the world the last couple of months, we met Liam Casey, and we should talk about Liam over in Shenzhen, China, and he's running a supply chain. And then we go to Barcelona, and there's a guy who runs a dock business, a shipping business in Barcelona. And everywhere you go, you meet these really weird, different people who are all connected on Twitter, but a lot of them don't have anything in common. Yeah,
well, that's the thing, because you really want to create a community. And I do think that there's actually an event in that manufacturing space. The future of manufacturing is something that I've certainly thought about as a target. The Maker Faire is this huge consumer phenomenon, but is there a conference or conferences in that space? Because it really is. There's the whole smart stuff angle, but there's also, oh my God, rapid prototyping, supply chains, all kinds of ways, crowdsourcing, look at what Threadless has done, crowdsourcing of designs. When does that go beyond T-shirts and into more complex stuff?
I'm shocked that nobody like HP or Apple or Microsoft has done a product in the public view. Has said, we know we need to do a phone 2 years from now, or a device that looks like, but we have no clue.
Well, in some ways, isn't Android a little bit like that? I mean, an open source.
A little bit.
But the other area, I just kind of want to, this is really kind of an interesting story of a successful event that we put together, where I was sort of, is our Velocity Conference, which is sort of for people who run high-performance websites. And what was really interesting about it was literally, it was kind of like an AA intervention. At OSCON, our open source convention, was it not this year, but last year. And Steve Souters had written this book, who was the chief performance Yahoo. He's now at Google. He'd written a book for us on web performance. He said, I really got to meet with you. And he said, I've got some other people who want to meet with you. And he and Jesse Robbins, and I forget who else was there, but it was maybe a half dozen of them. And they basically said, they get me in a room and they say, we need you to build an event for us. He said, we all want, there's this community of people like us who really care about, how do you get performance. We're the operations guys who don't get much respect, but we make all this stuff run. Make an event for us. So we said, okay, we'll do a summit. We'll try to figure out if there's some there. And it kind of spiraled, and it was actually one of our most successful conferences ever out of the gate. And it was literally the community coming and saying, we need an event, make it for us. And there's something, really what you want to do is to find a community that needs that opportunity to share. Yeah. And
since you mentioned high performance, what do you think is happening with cloud computing?
Well, there's a couple.
You see all the Amazon.
There's a couple of different aspects about cloud that I think are really important to distinguish. First of all, cloud is a name that applies to the fact that everything is non-local. I mean, Google is a cloud service. Amazon is a cloud service. Facebook is a cloud service. Your phone is a cloud service. iTunes is a cloud service. That whole application layer, everything that I've called Web 2.0 is in the cloud. But I think the term very specifically has come to mean what Amazon introduced with Amazon Web Services, i.e., we're literally going to give you, compute and storage in the cloud. And on that lower level, I think there is a revolution there in that it makes it takes us one step further away from the idea that you got to have, your local instance. You got to run your own servers. You got to run your applications locally. On machines that you control. But as Amazon has made clear, this is, Jeff has said this is a low margin business. We think we're going to win because we're good at low margin businesses. Microsoft and Google can't really compete with us because no matter what they do, it'll be worse than their existing business. For us, it only has to be a little better than this sort of crappy low margin business that we're in, that we've learned how to. And I really think I kind of amazed that I see all these people, big companies like HP and Sun and IBM and saying, oh, we got to get into this crappy low margin business. Because I always thought, hey, that's really looks kind of like the ISP business. It's the next generation of a business which is really big, but not really high margin. Yeah. And meanwhile, the high margin stuff is still going begging. I'm still, so every time I talk to these guys about cloud computing, I go, up the stack, because I still think that the future is in these data services. Yeah. And so, I go, son, look, you bought MySQL. Figure out what tables you ought to have in the cloud, so that people never again have to have their own copy, of some, data set. I think when we do that, you mentioned the BookScan application we have. Well, what do? We get this data from BookScan, and then we actually have to suck in this other data from Amazon, right, to fill out the data the BookScan gives us. What do we use as the key? The ISBN, right? Well, where do you get the ISBNs? Well, you get them from someone named Bowker, who assigns them. And we have to download them all because we have to have our own ISBN table. Now, how silly is that? Why can't we join to the ISBN table in the sky? Why can't you join to the zip code table in the sky? Why can't you join to the sales tax table in the sky? There's all kinds of data sets that ought to be just there for the taking, and your database package should be able to say, oh yeah, I'm joining to this cloud service. That's just one example. Like I'd say, I'd be optimizing MySQL, so it's literally a front end to cloud services. I had another conversation with HP about the cloud, and I said, okay, so what would I do if I were trying to think about cloud and HP? I'd go think about, what was the name of the company they bought that does point-of-sale systems? It wasn't VeriSign, but there was somebody who makes, cash register systems and stuff like that. Well, actually, they bought NCR too, didn't they? So they have this whole competency in point-of-sale. I go, I'd be out there figuring out what kind of cloud services would back up the smart shopping cart. you know, and you go, wow, they could do for the grocery store what Walmart has done for its stores, you know, trying to start building towards a smart supply chain application in the cloud. They have a whole bunch of assets there, but why would you want to be in the commodity end of cloud computing? You know, go figure out, you know, these higher level services. Now, it could be that there's something they know about their business that I don't, and if they really are optimized, they'll sell more servers, and that's worth way more than this futuristic crap that Tim O'Reilly talks about. But somebody's eventually going to do that, and they're going to, you know, be disruptive, you know. So,
how would you make money with Twitter?
That's a good question. I haven't. Well, first of all, I should say I'm mediocre at making money. You know, that's not my super strong suit. You know, I've built a decent sized company, but when I look at the number of things I've been part of, and the size of my company, I go, oh my God, you know, you must be one of the dumbest guys out there. You know, I mean, we were very early there in the commercialization of the internet. You know, we wrote about the World Wide Web when there were only 200 websites. You know, we've just been on the front end of a whole lot of revolutions, and you know. So I have all these billionaires who say, oh yeah, I learned how to do what what I do from one of your books. And I go, yeah, I got 25 or 30 bucks from you, and they became billionaires. You know, I go, what does that tell you about how much I know about, you know, how to make money on the internet? You know, I found, you know, a useful, you know, a profitable niche, but there's a lot of people who are way smarter than I am about how to make lots and lots of money on these technologies. Yeah.
It's been a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll do a little bit on our quick cam so people can look for that separately, because there's a bunch of people on FriendFeed and Twitter who want to get your answers on a bunch of esoteric weird things.
That's great.
But this was a lot of fun.
All right, super.
Thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you, Robert. Always fun.